Yes, that's right. It's the squeeze. I'm Logan Lockhart. That's Tyler Milliken, and it is on Primetime Sports Talk. You can watch on YouTube. You can listen wherever you get your podcast. Search up the squeeze. We're right there, and it's presented by Primetime Sports Talk. Mr. Milliken, how's it going in Boston?
It's an interesting time. We've had a couple pretty eventful weeks between, the Bruins being in the playoffs, the Red Sox being one of the, better teams in baseball. And then today's huge news drop of Danny Ainge stepping down, retiring, and Brad Stevens moving into the front office. It's wild here, but I'm excited to talk some baseball because it hasn't been in the focus too much lately.
Bleed green. Bleed green. That's all you
Yeah,
got to do.
those green teamers, man, there's nothing like them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're a special breed. Let me tell you, those green teams. All right, let's just kind of recap the month of May here. We're 2 months in the season, so we can look at it from two different perspectives. There's been good players that we know are good already, but they're really hot, and I'm going to bring up two in particular. They play on the same team. I'm going to bring them up. And then because we're 2 months in, we can start panicking about some guys. And should I just give a spoiler right now? Because we talked about this guy, I think, mid-April, but Francisco Lindor, we're still going to talk about him. Yes, we're going to talk about him yet again. That's not a good thing for Mets fans. But your hottest players, your players of the month, who's making your all-May team?
Okay, you want to go back and forth? I'll give one. You give one?
Sure.
All right, so I'll start with Max Muncy. He absolutely started the season a little bit slower, and some people were kind of sitting there getting a little nervous, but he came through in the month of May, and he, arguably the Dodgers' best hitter, him and Chris Taylor just continuing to do damage while, Cody Bellinger's been out. Mookie Betts hasn't been himself, but he slashed 330, 440, 714, 1155. That's a no joke line. You got 1100 OPS. You're enjoying life. And 10 home runs in the month, 5 doubles, 19 ribbies. And this is while he was playing, a decent amount of second base to kind of help them once they brought Albert Pujols in. And Pujols, has had a couple nice moments so far. But Max Muncy has been kind of that glue for a Dodgers team that's been a little bit up and down over the last month. He's kept them afloat. And once again, he's one of the more underrated players in baseball. It's been that way for a while now. And he fits right into that Dodgers mold of, versatility kind of guys they find and end up turning into, star players or, at least foundation pieces.
Now, in April, it was all about the walks. I mean, he walked at just an incredible rate. And then I believe Joe Davis, the voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and you can hear him occasionally doing Fox, and he tweeted he's got the highest WAR in Major League Baseball. Does that still hold up? So he's got the top WAR in the league, Max Muncy.
Yeah, listen, and this is a guy, you peg him. Obviously, he plays first base a majority of the time, but he has great, solid metrics at second base. He's no, bum out there, and he can make tough plays. He has range. It's just a guy who it's a really solid overall package of tools. And, year in and year out, guys like him, you expect, all right, the Dodgers found some lightning in the ball here. No, we're talking multiple years here where he's been a really, above average player for them. He's had some huge postseason moments that we've all seen over the years. And, he's a spark plug for them. He hit a ball into, McCovey Cove, I believe, a week or two ago that was one of the biggest bombs I've ever seen hit out there. And as a spark plug for that team, it's all the Dodgers really could ask for. And he continues to, rise above expectations time and time again.
They get Cody Bellinger back, and I may or may not mention him in struggling players. It's too early. I mean, he just came back from an injury. I'm not going to be too hard on the guy. But Dave Roberts gives him a night off yesterday. Of course, he's got to come in. It's the National League. He's going to pinch hit. And it just hasn't worked out so far. And I fully expect him by next week or the week after to get it rolling, right? And I'm going to follow up on that next time we do a show. I'm going to see how Cody Bellinger's doing. It's been a slow start coming back from injury.
Yeah, with Cody Bellinger, it's one of those things we just haven't seen him fully regain that MVP form, over the course of a solid stretch of games. We saw it come out last year in the playoffs, where he was making huge plays out in the outfield. He had some big home runs and big hits. And that was on top of the injury he was dealing with that, was self-inflicted at the time. But I want to see Cody Bellinger. I'm hoping now that he's back healthy. He played like 4 games before he initially went down. And, things haven't, started off on the best jump since he got healthy. But I'm expecting over, the final 4 months of the season, I want to see Cody Bellinger step out and show me why he's one of the premier young talents in baseball. I want to see it over the course of a regular season, or at least what's left, because the Dodgers need it right now. Mookie Betts is not Mookie Betts. Injuries continue to pile up, and they're slowly getting more healthy again. But we know the Dodgers, as great as that roster is, Cody Bellinger was arguably their second most important piece in terms of position players in that postseason run.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little more about the Dodgers as we move on here. Of course, that division is just now just wild. I mean, we talked about it in April, but now we're in June. So, yeah, we can have that conversation, and it's a valid one about the San Francisco Giants. Marcus Semien, he is one of my hottest players in baseball. I'm going to talk about his teammate right after this, who we already know who I'm going to mention. But Marcus Semien, who had a bit of a declining year in 2020, after 2019, he finished third in MVP voting in the AL, really good in Oakland, and he signs this one-year deal with Toronto. It's almost like a show-me kind of contract for Marcus Semien, saying, hey, I'm going to prove that I'm still a premier infielder in the AL, and then when I hit free agency next year, I'm going to get my longer-term deal. And this deal in Toronto, it's worked out brilliantly for the Blue Jays. And you're going to see Marcus Semien now, who is a leadoff hitter as we look at it. And there were some questions about that earlier in the season for Toronto. Now, without George Springer, he's kind of taken that spot and run with it. And that's why I think Semien's such a significant guy to mention here, is because Springer's not in the lineup. So Semien was kind of needed to be this good for Toronto, or else that lineup, which is so good, it just wouldn't have that same oomph to it, if you know what I mean. If a guy like Semien, a big offseason acquisition, didn't come through, he's already got 13 home runs, and he had 7 all of last year in that shortened season, 13 right now. And you know what? He's batting 300, and this is a guy who, you look at Oakland the last few years, the averages, they weren't crazy high in that ballpark. Semien right now, 300, and if you want to talk about OPS plus, 152. So he's at the, premium at the top of the league right now. Semien, you got to see him a couple of weeks ago in Dunedin. What do you think?
Well, the first thing I thought was, wow, I really was hoping the Red Sox had signed him during the offseason, on that kind of rebound deal. And obviously it just didn't end up lining up at the time. But, you just mentioned he had 7 home runs last year. I believe he had 8 in May alone. So if you're telling me a guy in a single month is eclipsing what he did last year, and obviously it was a shortened year, but on top of that, it's a 152 OPS plus this year. His, near MVP season was 140. So this is a guy at the plate right now. This is the best Marcus Semien we've ever seen. And obviously he's not playing a premier position at shortstop like he was, back a couple years ago now, or even last year. And, we always saw that he was kind of up and down there. The metrics from year to year, for the most part, weren't great, but Ron Washington played a really big part of him getting on, back on track in his career on that side of the ball. But he's fitting in perfectly with the Blue Jays. And like you said, if he wasn't here for this lineup, while it is a really solid lineup, I feel like people would be talking about George Springer a lot more. There'd be a lot more pressure for him to rush back from this injury. And George Springer's made it obvious. Listen, I am not rushing this at all costs. When I come back, I want to be 110% healthy. Marcus Semien allows you to do that. And obviously, we know he's going to be re-entering free agency pretty soon. So I'm curious to see what he ends up with deal-wise here. But he's playing himself into a pretty solid contract.
Yeah, he's got 12 doubles this year, and he's slugging .549, which would be his career high. So he's kind of putting up career numbers here all across the board. And that's after a rebound kind of year that he needed. You talked about the Red Sox. That might have been a fit. Kike Hernandez instead, right? That was what it was instead of Marcus Semien, right? I'm sure that Chaim Bloom would have loved to have Marcus Semien.
Yeah, 100%. But obviously, money and certain details like that, positioning and how everything's going. Like, let's be real. They signed Kike Hernandez and he's barely played second base. He's really played a majority center field this year. And where the Red Sox are kind of at, Jeter Downs was right around the corner. It was kind of a tricky situation in that light. I think the Red Sox were looking for something that they could really, if someone emerged, they could flip like Kike Hernandez into a super utility player. Or, like Christian Arroyo was playing well in the season. You saw him kind of take the shares at second base. Chaim Bloom just didn't seem like he wanted to lock in that light. But shout out to the Blue Jays. Great signing. One of the best of the offseason.
And that's the thing. Marcus Semien is not a super utility player. You're not seeing Marcus Semien in center field. But who else do you got that's hot?
Back to one of the best signings of the offseason. Listen, Rich Hill, ridiculous. He's 41 years old at this point. You think eventually Father Time would come here and be like, listen, that's it, especially for a guy who's dealt with so many injuries over the years. We saw last year the velocity had taken a huge step down while he was with Minnesota. Not that it was ever anything crazy, but we were talking like mid 80s. There was real panic, but 6 starts over the month of May, 34.2 innings, 0.78 ERA, 36 Ks, 194 batting average against. For a Rays rotation that lost Blake Snell, that lost Charlie Morton, Rich Hill doesn't give a damn. He steps in and he's performed better than either one of those guys have this year. And it's not even really close. Blake Snell's been fine. Charlie Morton's been really more of a disappointment. So once again, the Rays are finding, guys who do not cost a lot of money, bringing them in, and they're turning into great pitchers. And Rich Hill didn't have the greatest start to the year either. So to see him come on really strong, it's one of the reasons the Rays have been one of the best teams in baseball the last few weeks.
Yet again, the Rays come out on top whenever people said, okay, this is the move that's going to hold the Rays back. No. They come out on top yet again. We know all about that. AL East watchers. Come on. I mean, it's just a broken record right now at the Rays. I want to talk about someone in Colorado, actually, Ryan McMahon. Okay, now he's their best hitter. He's their best hitter right now. This is a team who still has Blackman. It's hard to believe. And they still have Trevor Story. It's hard to believe. And it's a team that we're not paying that much attention to this year, other than something with the GM leaving or this happening, or they're on a terrible road trip and they can't get it together. But Ryan McMahon looks good, and he's kind of coming into his own. This is a good hitter. We knew he was a good hitter. But to be the premium guy on a team, I didn't really see that coming. And I've been impressed with him. Now, the OPS plus is 114. I'm not saying it's Marcus Semien level. And I'm not saying that this guy at the end of the day is going to change life for the Rockies. I'm absolutely not saying that. But nice surprise in Colorado. Maybe they would even tell you there. It wasn't that much of a surprise because he can hit. That's kind of been how he's been labeled coming up here and his road to the majors. But McMahon in Colorado, you know what? I'm going to give the Rockies a little bit of love.
Yeah, listen, where the Rockies are right now, there's not much going for them. And even when you look at a Trevor Story who's injured right now, and just when he was playing, he didn't look like the Trevor Story we've seen in recent years. Ryan McMahon's been by far their most consistent player. And like you said, he's not lighting the world on fire. It's a 114 OPS plus. But for him, 13 home runs to be just a really consistent everyday player as other guys are starting to regress and, no longer be the impact players they were. It's nice to see the Rockies have something going in the right direction. He's not a free agent until 2024. So it's not like the Trevor Story situation where, listen, we got to deal him because he's not going to be here in, 5-6 months from now. They can hold on to him and maybe hope he becomes another one of those cornerstones alongside, Brendan Rodgers, and you can kind of build on that a little bit and, have a foundation that they really haven't had as of late. But it's been a solid start for him. I wish the Rockies had more going for them overall, but can't hate on his game. Rockies, listen, it's Coors Field. We know what it is. But to put these numbers up, you have to give him some attention.
Yeah, I think we do. And you know what? We're not going to just, be so harsh on everybody here. And the Rockies are in a division where, it's impossible, right? It's just not happening for them. Even to have a little bit of optimism, it's very difficult. In the Pirates case, you can stand there and say, our division's not very good. Maybe we can surprise some teams here. Well, you know what? At least they can say that. You can't say that in Colorado. Now, who else do you have that's hot?
Last but not least, I got to give some love to Hunter Renfroe. Red Sox fans everywhere have seen what he's done over the month of May, and he's been one of their best players. He's slashing 319, 333, 604, 938. Obviously, that OBP isn't going to be anything to write home about or go crazy, but he's hit 6 home runs, 8 doubles, 15 ribbies in the month of May, and some great defense on top of it. For a guy who got brought in, what was it, $3 million or whatever it was at the time, it looks like a great signing so far. He's really been an everyday player for the Red Sox, which wasn't the expectation initially. But due to the failings of Franchi Cordero and some other things, Renfroe's just kind of been that guy. And the Red Sox coaching staff has given him a lot of praise. They really like him. I think it's one of those things where Renfroe just really rough year with Tampa Bay last year, never got his footing. I think he hit 159, and it was an awful month of April for him. But this is the Hunter Renfroe people really dreamt on in San Diego. And I'm not saying he's going to be a 300 hitter or anything like that. But if you're telling me His batting line's right in that like 250-ish range right now. If he can give you a 250, 20 to 25 jacks and great defense, that's a huge get, especially considering he's under team control through 2023.
Renfroe for Tommy Pham, that was the trade. And it was a classic Rays trade where it was, okay, well, we trade a better player but get more years of control. So it was a classic Rays trade. But Hunter Renfroe was that guy. And in Tampa, up and down, you can see the tool in Tampa, at least. 159 batting average. We're not going crazy. But you can at least see something there. And the Red Sox took a flyer, okay? And it's a flyer that's worked out. So good for them, right? I mean, is a guy like Cordero, I bet you that Red Sox people are saying, okay, well, thank goodness we signed Hunter Renfroe, or else this outfield would be a lot weaker than it is right now.
Yeah, listen, Franchi Cordero, it's a shame he's sitting in AAA right now. And listen, he's hitting well. A lot of people haven't seen that. He's played, I believe, 3 or 4 games down there. Already has hit 2 home runs. Before he got demoted, he was swinging the bat better too. He was 5 for his last 15, but there's no denying he was arguably the worst hitter in baseball, before he got demoted. So we'll see if he ends up making a comeback before the end of the year. I'd be stunned if we don't see him again. But the people talk about the Andrew Benintendi trade who can't accept that Cordero was just the lottery ticket of the deal. They're not shutting up about it anytime soon.
No. Here we go again with Benintendi. I can just see what's going on in Red Sox land right now with looking at the former Red Sox. Okay, now who's playing well, who's not, and what kind of narrative are we create here?
That's the name of the game.
That's the name of the game. It's a fun game to play. I'm not going to lie, but that's the name of the game. All of our players here, the hottest players in the month of May, they've all been relatively interesting. I was going to bring up Vladimir Guerrero Jr. We already know how good he is. That's not even an interesting player to bring up. That's how good. He went 4 for 4 last night. The Blue Jays returned to Buffalo. I mean, it's just – so he hit a double. That was on the first pitch he saw the game. Second at bat. The second pitch he saw the game, home run. And that's off of the Marlins ace, Sandy Alcantara. You know what? I don't even know what to say anymore. Is it even worth talking about? He is that good. And this is officially a superstar breakout. This is not just any breakout, a superstar one.
I would say it's not, but it is, because there was so much hate coming down on Vlad Guerrero Jr. the last couple of years because the expectations were so high when he got promoted initially. People thought he was going to come up and be his dad immediately. Everyone, that was kind of, I don't want to speak for Blue Jays fans as a whole, but the outside world, everyone watching him come up at the time, there wasn't a more exciting prospect in the entire sport. So the fact that it took a couple years, that it took him, getting in better shape and kind of working on his body, listen, give him the praise right now, because so many guys can't ever get their body right, or they come up and struggle and it never clicks. We've seen it happen to so many top prospects. And to see him, retying for the MLB lead in home runs yesterday, this is amazing. This is a guy who's going to dominate in the AL East for years to come. He's going to be, the middle of that Blue Jays lineup, the heart and soul of it. He's not going anywhere. And I think by the end of the season, he'll be seen easily as a top 5 hitter in the game, and it won't even be a conversation.
No, not at all. And he might win MVP. Let's be quite honest here. He actually might. And that is
he
crazy.
Keeps his pace up.
Yeah, he really might. And you know what? He's got to be the front runner in the AL right now. I'm sorry. I mean, seriously, I want to know. I mean, who else is with him right now?
It's hard. Like, what, you want to have the conversation about Ohtani, who, let's be real, the stuff's kind of falling off at times a little bit. There's already some concerns. There was the weird traffic story where,
right,
he ended up not pitching, and then it was kind of like, all right, well, his velocity was down his last start. So, was this a way for them to kind of give him another couple days, a little bit more of a breather? Outside of that, guys who could really challenge in the AL right now, I'd put maybe Xander Bogaerts in that conversation, but still, to be on the level of what Vlad Guerrero Jr. is doing right now, it's a different level. This is, the best of the best in baseball.
And you mentioned his dad. When he came up to the majors, the thought was, oh, he might be better than his dad. And I think that's what it all was. It was that, his dad's a Hall of Famer. We have a player who's better than a Hall of Famer, potentially. I was at his second ever game. I can tell you that the atmosphere in the place, so every time he came up to bat, people thought he was going to hit one out or at least just crank a double off the wall. I mean, that was the expectation. So that just gives you perspective on what it was when he first came up against Oakland. And that wasn't his debut. That was the second game. Okay, so the excitement was down a bit, but still, that's what it was in that building. Now, let's talk about players we're panicking about. Who are we panicking about? We've mentioned Lindor already. Um, Listen, I'm on the fence here about using the word panic about Lindor, because I do believe that by the time we get to the All-Star break, things are going to be looking a little upwards for the Mets. And well, I know Syndergaard had a setback. That's really going to hurt them. But with Lindor, I'm on the fence of panic, and I'm curious to know if you're all the way in Panicville for Lindor.
So, but let's put this in a category, right? Am I telling you I'm panicking that Francisco Lindor is not going to be a good player ever again? No. Am I looking and I'm going to tell you I think 2021 is going to be seen as a down year for him at this point, no matter what? Yeah, I'm getting there. It's a 198 batting average, 293 OBP, 71 OPS plus, 4 home runs overall. And listen, the numbers are bad. Anybody can recite a box score to you. What scares me is how many people are talking about his hitting mechanics at this point. The fact that he's taking longer and longer to load at the plate than he did when he was a rookie in that sense. And you look at the expected, baseball savant stats, expected batting average, expected slugging. None of it is saying, listen, he's getting really unlucky. No, it looks like a serious mechanical issue in his approach at the plate. And it would explain a lot why he's not driving the ball the same, why he continues to be so late. Is obvious differences from his swing even just a couple of years ago. And if I'm the Mets right now, I am nervous because these kind of things can really linger, especially over the course of a full year.
Especially with that contract. I mean, that is something that immediately he can be batting 250, to be quite honest with you, and the concern about the contract would still be up in the air and people would be talking about it. Okay, but he's not. He's batting 198. He's under the Mendoza line. Okay, so yeah, the contract is going to be there anyway, but it doesn't help when you're not batting 200.
And listen, you know what was like, it really stuck with me. I don't know if you saw the question that got raised to him. It was probably, within the last week. I can't remember what day. But they were like, how are you dealing with the pressure? Like, you hear fans booing you. And he's like, it's never fun getting booed. You know what I mean? And just watching the guy who's so full of happiness, and he was smiling when he said it, you could tell. It's been hard, man. This has not been an easy kind of transition for him in his career. And we've seen the first couple months, not only for him, but the Mets have been extremely up and down. I really feel for him because I can't imagine, not only is he trying to prove himself to his teammates, but a new owner in Steve Cohen who put so much money in him. It's tough, man. It's not fun. And one of my closest friends is a Mets fan. And listen, he's not by any means saying I'm done with Francisco Lindor, but it's like, what can you say at this point? You can't say it's a slow start anymore. It's just there's something wrong. And how long will it take till he fixes it?
And there's certain markets, as we know in this country, where it's not a joke, okay? And I know he wasn't a free agent, but it felt like it. When you go there and you're getting paid big money and you're like in your late 20s or something, you're expected to be a superstar. Okay, we can go through all the markets all day long. New York is one of them. It's not a joke, and you have to expect that. And he must have known that, right? He must have.
Listen, that's one of the reasons he seemed to be so excited to go there. He was going from Cleveland, where, no offense, Cleveland, but not many fans in the stands, not a lot of money being spent, and overall, not a lot of people care. And that's just being realistic about that market. You go to the Mets, it's like being, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers. People are sitting there and they're going to jump on you if you're not living up to that deal. And he's right in that spot now. Sports radio is killing him every day. And we know New York radio is no joke as a whole. And that's coming from a guy who works in Boston radio. But listen, I hope for Lindor, you just got to keep playing him. Let him keep going out there. I'm surprised we haven't seen a breather at this point, some kind of phantom IL stint just to say, dude, like, you need 5 or 10 days away from the ballpark. Work on your swing. Sit with the coaches and see if you can just readjust. Because, when you have Harold Reynolds, Buster Olney, all these guys across the sport, doing diagrams of how different his swing is and his issues with loading his hands, what are the hitting coaches telling you? And it's probably not easy over there because they fired Chili Davis, about a month ago now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what? You mentioned radio. Radio is the backbone of criticism for anything, right? I mean, you go to New York radio, okay? It's not a joke, like
they'll eat you alive.
Yes, and there's no problem with that. I mean, and you know what? That's what people expect, to be eaten alive. I'm hearing it right now. In a lot of places, you look at the NHL playoffs. There's teams that are eliminated that shouldn't have gotten eliminated. Toronto, Edmonton, those are teams. They're not happy in those markets. Try being a player on the Eagles, getting paid big money, a quarterback, and not playing well. You think it's all going to be roses and sunshine on the radio? Absolutely not. And Lindor's experiencing that right now.
100%. And we've seen guys, whether it's Carson Wentz, completely break down under the pressure and it just never worked. But that's what it is. Here in Boston, we saw David Price go through it for years where, to be honest, radio was diagnosing him, was saying he had anxiety and mental issues and all these different things. It's like, dude, that will beat down on everybody. And eventually David Price, we all know he got the last laugh. He ended up bringing a World Series to Boston, but it doesn't usually end that well for those kind of guys.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Anyone else on your panic list?
I'll throw Elvis Andrus out there. Okay. We all know he got shipped over to Oakland with the Chris Davis deal, 2 veterans who were really lost. But the truth is, Elvis Andrus hasn't been really an MLB-capable player for a couple of years now. It's been about a 70 OPS plus in 2019 and 2020, but he's completely fallen off the deep end in 2021. 205, 254, 257, 511. When your slugging is almost less than your on-base percentage, that tells you the entire story. Like I said, 50 OPS plus. He still steals some bags. I believe he's 3 for 5 this year. The defense has regressed, and somehow he is only 32 years old.
That is really hard to believe.
It's ridiculous. And listen, I give credit to the Rangers. Obviously, it wasn't the deal they had to make. It wasn't too exciting for either side. But usually I look at Oakland and they're able to find these guys, these nuggets, and kind of get something out of them. It says a lot that Elvis Andrus is out here and there's nothing coming. And he hasn't hit a home run this year either.
No. I thought it was a good deal for Texas. They get Chris Davis back, but they also get Jonah Heim, the catcher, who's a switch hitter. And him and Jose Trevino are kind of platooning back and forth. So they got a guy who's in the lineup. And Jonah Heim, he bats 9th, and we're not going crazy about it. He's got a little bit of power, but you're getting something back for him.
And that was the thing. I think even the Rangers saw the writing on the wall. Everybody did with Elvis Andrus. And the Athletics were kind of in a position, letting go of Marcus Semien. Listen, not a lot of money to spend. How can we bring a guy who hopefully can at least hold the position down and not be a complete disaster? Unfortunately, he's been a complete disaster. And we saw the awful error he had early in the year that cost them a game. It's not pretty, but Oakland, they're still in first place. They're still doing their thing. And they're lucky to have, a guy like, Chapman at third base who can kind of bring great defense and maybe make up for some of those problems.
First place, but there's no doubt there's a gaping hole at a premium position. And that's not good. And that would be fascinating to follow as we get closer to the postseason, because having that hole at shortstop just might not cut it. We're going to get to trade deadline talk soon, in the coming weeks. And that might be something we have to talk about, because Oakland's a first place team. And you just can't be getting that production out of Elvis. And it hurts me personally. Elvis, one of my all-time favorites. But the Rangers have seen the writing on the wall, like Rougned Odor and Sin-Soo Choo. I mean, so you kind of get these guys where it's like, okay, the era's over. You got to move on here. And I know people, yeah.
And that's the hard part. And I felt like even the Rangers, for a couple of years, they held on way too long. You know what I mean? We saw Rougned Odor was hitting below 200 almost yearly. And they just were hoping that somehow this dead core was going to come back to life. And it never did. And we've seen, Odor's had a couple moments with the Yankees. Andrus has really had nothing. But neither guys are anything close to the players they were, when they first got the extensions the Rangers gave them. But yikes. Yeah, if I'm a A's fan, I'm not expecting anything from Andrus going forward. And if I'm Elvis Andrus, I don't know how much time left I have in the big leagues.
Who else do you got on the panic list?
Last, and definitely, I'll put him as least. Jackie Bradley Jr. hitting 150, 216, 269, 485, 4 home runs, 33 OPS plus. I didn't understand this deal when the Brewers made it. It was obviously a weird fit. He really is not the starting center fielder when they're healthy. We saw Lorenzo Cain continues to get the time out there, but once again, he's going on the IL. So Jackie Bradley will have more reps out there, but the guy hasn't done anything at the plate this year. And I think for someone who was so inconsistent and rough at Fenway at different portions, despite having a great year last year, you're seeing what it's like when he comes out of that environment. And I don't have faith in JBJ turning around, because I've watched him daily since 2013. I've seen the ups and downs. I've seen what it is out there. And while he can catch hot and go crazy, listen, I think being at Fenway, being in a place where, the hitting coaches knew how to work with him, an organization that he was comfortable with, that was a big deal. He's out on his own island now over with the Brewers, and it hasn't looked like it's gotten any better since opening day.
And that whole Brewers lineup, this is holding the team back at this point, and getting Yelich back is a boost. But if I see another start of Brandon Woodruff's, to me, okay, it's him and DeGrom for Cy Young right now, and I know we can talk about some other guys, but I'm looking at Brandon Woodruff right now, and I'm going, you know what? He absolutely should be a guy who wins 20 games in a year. Okay, I'm looking at this Brewers team, and they supported him last game. But overall, it just hasn't been there. And JBJ's, he's a guy that you kind of expected to give a little bit of a boost.
Well, the way Red Sox fans talked about him, like it was the second losing of Mookie Betts. Let's be real here. I can't tell you how many people called and cried about, oh, how special the defense is. And listen, when he gets hot, he gets hot. Yeah, when he gets hot, he gets hot. But the writing's been on the wall for some time now. It's just there's just not a consistent profile there. And he was luckily able to take advantage of Fenway Park. But Milwaukee's not that kind of hitting environment, and it doesn't help Christian Yelich between the health issues and no power from him this year at all. That's another huge problem for them. And you look at Brandon Woodruff right now. I couldn't agree more. It's him and Jacob deGrom, and I look at Woodruff. Listen, we're already not talking about Corbin Burns anymore. And it's crazy because he was the talk of the first month of the season. But it just speaks to how great Brandon Woodruff has been.
And when he back to Jackie Bradley Jr., when he gets hot, he gets hot. Well, you know what? I can say that about I can count them on my hands right now. I can say that about a lot of guys in baseball. Okay, off the top of my head, when he gets hot, he gets hot. So, that's something to look forward to. Okay, that's not unique. And Jackie Bradley Jr., he just falls into that lump, and when he's cold, he's cold. Okay, so it goes the other way. Anything else to add on Jack Bradley Jr. in Milwaukee?
I just think the people who were expecting him to get a multi-year deal this offseason, and when he didn't get it, were surprised. This is why he will play for very short money next year. And I'm curious to see where he ends up because there is value there. I just think it's a guy who, if it's not the exact right circumstance, you're going to see these down years time and time again because it's mental. It's a lot of mental stuff.
We'll stay in the Brewers division. We'll talk about the Cardinals. Two things, Jack Flaherty. That's a tough one. And this is a team who I've always looked at this year and I've said, okay, good team. But then I think about the division they're in and I'm going, well, the division's a little weaker than the rest of the National League. And when the Cardinals run into the Dodgers or the Padres, it's not going to be easy pickings, right? They may not look like that first place team. And losing Jack Flaherty, this is the anchor of the rotation. This is a tough one.
Yeah, especially for a rotation overall. Now there's even more pressure on a guy like Adam Wainwright, who we know how much mileage, and he's been really, really solid for them. The fact that he's having the second kind of surge after many thought his career was done, it's huge. But you lean on an arm like that time and time again, it's not going to get you through, especially when the Cardinals' rotation was already thin. They've already dealt with injuries. Miles Michaelis, we saw, comes back finally after the flexor tendon and shoulder problems, forearm tightness. We don't know if we're going to see him again this year. It's a bullpen that's been very inconsistent. They have a guy, John Gant, who's been, good, but you look at all the advanced peripherals, they tell you, yikes, he's walked like 34 batters and over like something close to 50 innings. So a lot of luck going their way. And they have some guys in that bullpen who have a history with starting, but have just never clicked in that spot. And for a bullpen that is struggling, you don't want to take from that either. I'm looking at the Cardinals right now, and it's been great to see, Nolan Arenado look amazing. And, unfortunately, Harrison Bader goes down again just right when he gets back. It's a lot of the same for the Cardinals. It feels like the same problems you've seen the last couple of years with them. And I'm looking at a Cubs team that's surging with Javier Baez and Chris Bryant looking like what we had hoped for years. And then you have the Brewers, who continue with, who wants to face Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns back-to-back to start a playoff series? Nobody.
Nope. And the lineup, I anticipate, will get better. The Cubs, as you mentioned, the Cubs are in a desperate spot because of the contract situation. So they're going to go down one of three ways. You can either do a hybrid where you keep Rizzo, but okay, Baez, we're going to have to let you walk. Bryant, depending on how the team's doing, we might deal them. Or if the team plays well, they're all staying. They're going to be here on, let's say, September 15th, right? And then it's the Cubs in the division where it's very winnable right now, especially with the Cardinals faltering in some areas. Still the team to beat, in my opinion, in the Central. But at the end of the day, I'm very disappointed in that bullpen, as you mentioned. On paper, I like their bullpen a lot, more than a lot of teams. And Alex Reyes has been good. But Alex Reyes, when he's not on, he's blowing saves and he's got command issues. He walks a guy. He walks a guy every inning.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the other guy, and he's been pretty solid this year, but Genesis Cabrera is a very similar profile across the boards. Where when they can't find the zone, it's a complete disaster, and it's why neither of them have really been able to develop into the starting pitchers many hoped. But yeah, where if I'm the Cardinals right now, listen, Jack Flaherty, the way they're describing this injury, it is not good. It's basically described as a very bad strain, basically a tear. So who knows? And we're talking, legs on a pitcher like that, especially someone like Jack Flaherty. That's a big deal. That is not something you come back from and you don't think about.
Yep, absolutely. The Cardinals were involved in some major news, but more about rumblings and what is happening with Major League Baseball. And Giovanni Gallegos and Mike Shildt, I mean, this is something where it's becoming a reoccurring topic of discussion, and it's about cheating, and it starts on the mound. And there was a situation where Gallegos was asked to change hats, get a new hat. Okay, you can't wear that one. Joe West involved. And this just spiraled into headline news around the sports world in the country, not just of baseball, anything.
Well, it's crazy because you look at it and it hits right on the story everyone was talking about right when the season started of foreign substances in the sport, whether it was initially the story through The Athletic that they were cracking down, and then the story about Trevor Bauer, which, like we talked about at the time, nothing came out of it because it was someone making a big deal out of something that's going on across the league. My problem with it overall, Schilt saying it's baseball's dirty little secret. Yes, but I think it's a little more than that. We all know about it at this point. It's really not a secret. It just makes me turn to look at Rob Manfred and say, this is what poor leadership does. Because nobody in the sport knows what's the line. Nobody in the sport has any kind of regulation or way to judge it. It's all opinion. It's all subjective. In this situation, Joe West's so random, coming off his historic day on top of it, to go out there and listen. It looked what he has on his hat. Craig Kimbrell has that on his hat every single game. It's very common. It looks like a combination of sunscreen and rosin, right? Something like that doesn't freak me out. That's what you see across the sport. What freaks me out is guys who are reaching into their glove, obviously using those kind of concoctions. Garrett Cole, who we all know the story that's been developing for a few years with him and the former Angels clubhouse attendee. That's what bothers me. And, I don't want to throw guys under the bus. John Means has been another one of those guys. It was someone last night. It had popped up that everyone was talking about that was reaching into their mitt. But, it's kind of, James Karinchak, the Indians relief pitcher. People were posting it all over online. Josh Donaldson's talking about it. It's like poor leadership shining through. And now baseball, solely as the year goes along, it's only going to get exposed and talked about more.
Yeah, and it's about picking your battles. I mean, why are we just picking, okay, let's pick this one, but not that one? And then someone has to put their foot down at some point and say, okay, this is going on. We're going to stop it. And we're actually going to put our foot down. It can't be this thing where it's a story for a couple days, and then we don't talk about it for a couple weeks. And then it comes up again, and then we talk about he did it, but he didn't do it. And it's a mess. It's kind of a nightmare to go through.
Well, that's what happens when you don't have regulation. There's no way to judge it. They're leaving it just like they did to the steroid era. Police yourselves. And that's my biggest problem. You can't leave guys who, listen, if I put this on my glove and I touch it, I'm going to have an ERA that's a run and a half lower, and I'm going to get paid this offseason and feed my family. Just like the guys who said, listen, I'm going to put this needle in me. I'm going to hit 45 home runs this year. Mm-hmm. Players, you can't ask them to do that. It's just not the right kind of line to walk. You're asking for chaos. And now, more than ever, I feel like we're in, the new age steroid era. It's just with foreign substances and pitchers.
Yep. And you talk about evolution and how things evolve. I guess this is it, right? It's not steroids anymore. It's the other way around. It's on the mound. And that's where the evolution has really hit us. And it's hit us in a very alarming way, where it's like it just comes out of nowhere. And then we got to talk about the same thing over and over again, right? With steroids, yeah, it was reoccurring, but there wasn't that one bombshell that changed everything, and it changed how the sport looked. For this, there hasn't been a bombshell yet. We're just kind of going through the motions of talking about it. And you know what? it's puzzling. I got to be honest with you. It really is. And I don't know where we go from here.
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Major League Baseball knows where to go. And it's one thing for us not to know where to go, but when your entire leadership of the sport, veterans, people around the game don't know where to go, that's when I get scared.
Right. Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, a couple things here. The Yankees, they're in action. And you know what? Look, getting swept by the Tigers, that's not going to be a good look, especially when you're in that kind of situation. But now you got to run into the Rays. And I understand that the Rays are a team that's just streaking. They seem to always be streaking as of late. And Clint Fraser's heroics were much needed last night. Let's just put it this way. But with the Rays are kind of establishing themselves as the favorite in the AL East very quickly. And as we're into June, we can start to look at standings and say, okay, well, I can anticipate this happening or that happening. You look at the East, and you're looking at the Rays yet again in a position, this team won the pennant last year. Okay, so they're kind of looking like that team.
100%. They, in some ways, they look better. You know what I mean? Almost deeper, which is the crazy part to me. And I'm looking where the Yankees are right now. The Yankees, you know, I had them as the clear AL East eventual winners. I thought they were destined for that. I can't see that anymore. I just can't. The Rays, their run differential is far and above the best in the AL East. I believe the second best in the American League as a whole. And they're just getting stronger. And we haven't even seen the, you know, what they have for talent on the way up. You know, whether it's Vidal Brujan or Wander Franco. These guys aren't even in the bigs. This isn't even the best roster. How about we talk about a Brandon Lowe that's hitting, or Brandon Lau, excuse me. I always do that. Who's hitting below 200 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, like this is, and he was arguably their best hitter last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still at this point in the season. Geez, if I'm the Red Sox, the Yankees, or the Blue Jays, I'm like, I don't know what to do at this point. They let pitchers go. They find better ones to replace them. Their lineup, their best guys are struggling. Other guys start clicking. It's insane. And, you know, it's not like Randy Arozarena has been the postseason version of himself. He's been really good this year. Don't get me wrong, but this is a race team that still feels like they have more to go in. With Mike Zunino hitting bombs, come on. Like, what do you say at this point?
And we're still waiting that anticipated debut of Wander Franco. And that's really going to put all the attention on the Rays, as if there wasn't already enough, because we're always looking at what the Rays are doing. They just had a series against the Phillies, and I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm going, are the Rays really going to, you know, they take care of business. That's the thing about the Rays. You know what I mean? I mean, they're going to walk into the Bronx, and you expect them to kind of take care of business.
100%. And on top of it, I look at it, listen, they make this Willy Adames trade. JP Fireeyes goes into the bullpen. Great late inning arm for them immediately. Slots in perfectly. It's ridiculous. It's crazy to watch. And I'm at this point, listen, I'm a clown for counting them out heading into this year. I thought they were going to be likely the odd man out of the Blue Jays, Yankees, Red Sox. Nope, not this year. I fell in that same trap once again, and I deserve it because I usually don't. And this year, put the clown nose on me. I'm right here.
That familiar trap, isn't that something that we've all done? Anyone outside of that area, Tampa Bay area, you know, I feel like we've always done that over the last, I feel like for 20 years, we just fall into that trap. And now, okay, maybe not 20 years ago. They were brutal when they were the Devil Rays. In the Rays era, okay, that is a familiar trap. Now, before we wrap up, we'll touch on the Marcell Ozuna situation, arrested. Do you have any thoughts on this and a little bit about the Braves and how this affects them?
Yeah, from the crime standpoint, best wishes to, his wife and everything and that entire situation. I know both of them have a history in this stuff that isn't great, but we all know where it stands in terms of a human issue. It's awful, it's disgusting, and it's ugly. I think that's the obvious here. I think the standpoint where we look at it in terms from a baseball sense, this is a really big problem for the Braves because Marcell Ozuna was kind of, what pushed them from, the young Braves into this, kind of contender, a team that was so close to the World Series last year. Taking him out of that mix, someone who seemed to have a really close relationship with the Ronald Acuna Jr., with an Ozzie Albies. It's ugly, man. And that's a contract that's backloaded that just started this year. Ken Rosenthal put out a great piece saying, listen, history shows this contract is probably not going to get voided. Very ugly all the way around, especially for a young team that felt like their window was really wide open starting this year.
It's been a disappointing start to the year. First 2 months now, I can't even call it a start anymore. But again, if you want to go to the baseball side, I know there's a human side to this, but if you do want to go to the baseball side, the NL East is still wide open. It's really amazing how we could have had the same conversation literally 2 months ago about the NL East. And again, no one's kind of breaking through. And with Lindor struggling like he is at the Mets, it just kind of prolongs everything. And we're still kind of waiting for the Nationals. I know the Nationals are dealing up a lot, but we're waiting for them to kind of get up to where we expect them. So this division is kind of giving the Braves a break, because if there was a team here like a New York or a Philadelphia even, right, then they would have been in big trouble.
Yeah, we even see with the Phillies between the daily Joe Girardi drama over there lately, whether it's, him beefing in the dugout with Gene Segura and them going over the defensive problems, or him getting in fights with the media over talking about guys being available or unavailable. It doesn't look like things are great over there. I still think I'm going to lean Mets, even with Noah Syndergaard going down, which, listen, he was throwing 90-mile-per-hour sliders in spring training. I don't know why anybody's surprised by this news. Just like when Mike Soroka went down after he was being rushed along. I really have been confused by some of these rehab processes going on this year. And it's interesting that they happen in the same division, obviously different injuries, but like you said, this thing's wide open. And I think for the Braves, what's scary is there's not a solution. Maybe it's a Drew Waters who is hitting well in AAA, but the strikeouts are still really high. But right now, there's no immediate resolution for Marcell Ozuna, and that's not something they can fill really probably any way this year.
No, I mean, it is what it is with the Braves. I know that's a cliche, but it's not like there's an immediate opportunity to go and do this or do that. And okay, but at least this is it with the Braves, right? So you got to just go through with what you have. That is the squeeze. I'm Logan Lockhart. That's Tyler Milliken. It's presented by Primetime Sports Talk. You can watch on YouTube, listen on all the platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. The Squeeze. You'll find us right there. Tyler, I'll see you next week. Final words. Let's get a little Red Sox preview here for the week ahead. What are the Red Sox looking like?
Oh, listen, they better find a way to get a couple from the Astros here, because they've been dominated by their pitching, which really impressive. The Astros, I'm telling you, people do not talk about their pitching enough, and they still need to get fully healthy with Framber Valdez and a couple things there. But wow, that Astros team is not going anywhere this season, and that pitching is going to surprise people. They just got to figure out the bullpen, really. And then, the Yankees are right around the corner. And I feel like that's going to be, first time they meet this year, everyone's going to be kind of keeping their eyes to see how they compete and go at it. And I think that first series will really set the tone for how those teams perform from this point forward and going down the stretch, because they're going to be clashing a ton.
For me, it's the biggest series of the year thus far. Whenever you get the Yankees and Red Sox meet, it's big, but here the implications are big, and I know the Rays will be watching as well. I think one of those games is on Sunday Night Baseball, so everyone will be watching, and we'll all have our eyes on the greatest rivalry in the MLB. Tyler, I will see you next week. For you, thank you for watching on YouTube. Primetime Sports Talk, it's The Squeeze. Until next week, here we are, signing off.